Hey, BraveCo men, this week's podcast episode is Brian Johnson from our BraveCo conference last year. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Have a great week. We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet.
Well, I heard Jason was amazing today.
Yeah.
I like the older I get, the more I like get respect for people that try to do really hard things. And then don't give up, like just keep doing it. And I don't know about you, but like I would say more times than not where I'm just like, I think I'm going to tap out. But then I never do. It's the craziest thing. Sometimes I should have, yeah. But it's hard following God and doing what you're supposed to do and confessing to your wife and having conversations about the hard stuff and actually like being, like Jay would say, like real, like being real, being honest, like really real and honest and vulnerable and all the things. And I think, it's hard living in a culture where you get the accolades if you look a certain way or act a certain way, and it doesn't really matter. Like, it's the media, it's the social media world that we can look a certain way, but we aren't that way, and we no one knows it. It's the best, but also the worst. So it's really hard to be vulnerable and just kind of live in this climate. I think more than ever, living in this climate, pure before God, it's just really hard. And so I think just for people to show up to something like this, and for Jason and Chris, you guys putting this on and starting this BraveCo idea, like, I think to me, like I have such huge respect. I've been texting Jay a lot, about this and just cool little things. Like I love ministry, but I also equally love like business stuff. And this last few years, I've been doing a lot of business things, and I just love ideas and getting excited about things. We've been texting back and forth, and just I get really excited about a friend of mine going after something that's huge, that's bigger than he is, that's bigger than his family, that's bigger than us, that only God could cause this to become what it's supposed to become. And I really have respect for that. So thanks for giving me your speech, not give you my speech. And I think all of us are called to that type of a life where we step out into stuff that we're like, oh, I'm scared to death. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm just going to risk it and do this. And I think risk is a huge word, especially for men. We're called to be the risk takers. We're called to be that for even our wives and for the people around us. We're supposed to be the Davids that go out and just make it happen. And I think culture is trying to take away that courage and that mantle off of our shoulders and put it on God knows what. I don't even know what it is now. We'll talk about some of that in a little bit. But so I have so much respect the older I get for people that try. And I don't even think it's succeeding. It's trying. Yeah. Just actually trying to do something and failing almost. And I have a story in my talk today that I'm with a guy that just failed miserably. But I'm like, I have the most respect for this guy. Why do I have so much respect for this guy that miserably failed? Why? Well, it's because he tried. And there's something about that it's like, I think it's more kingdom than American, but it's also, there's something about, we won't go there. Sorry, that's not the session. Well, I want to start this message today on Jesus, the role model that Jesus was. Because a lot of times I think, like for me, I have like role models. Like I follow a guy on Instagram named Cameron Haynes, and he runs like 50 miles a day, and like it's crazy. And he lifts weights and he shoots his bow, and he's like this, what in the world? And I like look at that and I'm like, man, that's so inspiring. So I've got a lot of those kind of guys, and I follow different accounts on Instagram, and I just to see what they're doing because they inspire me to be better. But I think we need to really remember that the number one role model in our lives, not just for being a human or a Christian, but for being a man, is Jesus. Like he's the end. He's our compass for not just being a Christian, but being an actual man on this earth right now. I think the world, it's not a mystery that a lot of the paintings of Jesus, in my opinion, or the stories of Jesus, that the nursery rhymes is almost like a Jesus like with a nice silk robe, and he's definitely has long hair, flowing hair and shiny, and he's like picking flowers, and he's super nice, and he's kind, and he's dancing like ballet, and we have this like thing, like he's just this passive being. And I think that's partly why most of the church is women. If you look at the stats, there's a not that women are drawn to that, but romance novel Jesus is not reality. And so I feel like culture has distorted our view of who Jesus is. How can I be in love with a guy? Wait, hold on, or a God, man? I mean, what is that? And so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit today, because I and also sharing about what, like, personally I've kind of been learning, and because I think, I was talking with Jade about speaking to Dan. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? And I mentioned something in this thing. We were doing a podcast, like an interview, and he's like, you should talk about that Lazarus story that I talked about. That's what I'm learning. I'm learning about that story, so that's what I'm going to share about, and then go into some other stuff. So Jesus wasn't that. He wasn't romance novel. No, I'm good. I've got a thing. But Jesus was the most courageous, toughest, honest, compassionate, brave, bold, enduring, patient, forgiving, understanding, committed. You could fill in the blanks. Self-controlled, fearless, wise, loving, authentic, and faithful person that ever lived. Jesus wasn't soft. He wasn't passive. He was fully alive. Our true north is the life of Jesus in being a man. If you have your Bibles, you can turn. I'm going to read out of the Passion Translation, just because it's. I've heard it doesn't, but I like the way it sounds. So can we just do that? So John 11. And we'll start with verse 32, and you can just listen if you want. But this is a story about Lazarus, and we've all heard this story, or hopefully we've heard this story. If we've been in the church for any time, we've heard this story of Lazarus, and the part about how Jesus goes to the tomb, and he come back to life, rise up, Lazarus, and he comes out. That's the part of the story we pay attention to. But I'm going to read this because I want to pinpoint a couple other things, how he unpacked and how he handled this whole situation. When Mary finally found Jesus outside the village, she fell at his feet in tears and said, "Lord, if only you had been there, my brother would not have died." What's weird is Jesus finds out that he's sick and dead, and he's like, "No, I'm going to hang out 2 more days or whatever." It's like, he's on his own time. He's an artist. He's late to everything. When Jesus, which I'm so used to, when Jesus looked at Mary and saw her weeping at his feet, and all her friends were with her grieving, I love this. He said, he shuddered with emotion and was deeply moved with tenderness and compassion. He said to them, "Where did you bury him?" "Lord, come with us, we'll show you," they replied. Then tears streamed down the face of Jesus. Seeing Jesus weep caused many of the mourners to say, "Look how much he loved Lazarus." Yet others said, "Isn't this the one who opens blind eyes? Why didn't he do something to keep Lazarus from dying?" Which that's me. That's what I would have said. Then Jesus, with intense emotion, came to the tomb, a cave with a stone placed over its entrance. Jesus told them, "Roll away the stone." And we know what happens in the story. From that point on, he raises Lazarus from the dead. And we cheer, and it's one of the best stories in the Bible. But the part I want to focus on is what Jesus did before raising Lazarus from the dead. It says that he was moved with compassion. He was distraught. He wept. Jesus allowed himself to feel that pain, that anguish, that all of those flood of emotions. He didn't have to, but he did. what was happening in the moment with the sisters that were weeping and in anguish and all the people that were there. Jesus basically met them in that moment. And then doesn't dismiss that and then goes raise Lazarus from the dead. Yeah. He didn't have to do that. I don't think faith avoids emotions. That's good. And I think that we've kind of have this thing where if I not only feel emotion or if I express it through what Jesus is weeping, that's expressing emotion, then I'm showing everyone around me and God and the angels and everyone, and I'm going to give the enemy a foothold because that's not faith. Yeah. Well, the guy who invented faith is obviously distraught and showing emotion and showing empathy and being in this moment with the mourners, with the people. He saw the whole picture. He saw everything, the doubt, the pain, the fear, all of it. And he chooses to believe right in the middle of it. He didn't avoid. Instead, he jumps into the middle of that storm and literally wrestles it and obviously wins. How Jesus handled this is not in the obvious resurrection, but in his connection to the sisters was incredible to me. Not to dismiss the supernatural moment where he raised them from the dead at all. To me, it actually highlights it even more, the fact that you can live in both tensions and still see the miraculous. And I think a lot of times we'll do is I'm believing, and all we're really doing is avoiding pain and fear and all the emotions in the name of believing. But I don't think you can actually experience faith unless you just jump yourself right into the middle of all of that stuff. Having a conversation with your wife, the only way to resolve stuff is just to jump into it. When you avoid in any relationship too long, it doesn't work. And I know this because I'm an avoider. That's my personality for the longest time. But eventually you have to face stuff head on. And Jesus showed us that. And what's amazing is when you look at this chapter in this story, and then you start reading all the other encounters he had with humans, individuals while he was on the earth, you start realizing he didn't do what we would normally do. What most of us would do is this. I would have done this. Guys, sorry I'm late. Because he's going to be fine. It's okay. You don't need to feel this way because I'm here. I'm going to fix this. I'll raise him up. And then let's move on to the next thing. And I'm dismissing the emotion the whole time. It's cool if you knew the facts. You guys tell I'm a fixer. My wife will bring something to me and I'm like, if you just knew the truth, you wouldn't feel that way. And for some reason, it never has worked. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sitting here going, Jesus totally could have, and every time he performed a miracle or met with people, he could have just been like, I'm Jesus and I'm here and I'm not gonna show emotion. But he did every single time. And it's really amazing actually, to realize we can have emotion, we can feel all these things and still walk in the stuff we're supposed to walk into. It's really, to me, it's freeing. So faith doesn't avoid emotion. I think that's it's huge for me. I was speaking on the marriage thing. I wrote this down. If you want to become a strong man, like Jesus, find a strong woman. Of course, he didn't have a woman, but whatever. If you want to become a strong man, find a strong woman and hang on and don't let go, because a strong woman demands that you become a strong man. And you have no other option but to become a strong man if you marry a strong woman. And so that's the fast track to becoming a strong man. And the slow track is just through the hard knocks of life where you get knocked over and then you get back up. A strong man, I think, is being someone others can lean on for safety, encouragement, and security. It's like how a roof shelters. Like in a storm. It's like how a roof brings protection and shelter. And that's what we're supposed to be. Strength and manliness is that. I don't think strength and manliness is lording over or creating a harem of whatever and telling them what you want them to do and them serving you left and right, even though I think that there's honor in leadership that has to have. I think people that follow leadership have to know honor. But I think in being a strong man, it's a safety net. It's a place of shelter. For my wife, the more I avoided, the more, or the whatever, or didn't handle situations, her respect for me really dropped dramatically. And a lot of us men, when we associate toughness or manliness with being a man, it's the opposite of vulnerability. It's the opposite of showing emotion. It's the opposite of having pain and expressing it and putting ourselves in a process. It's more like, I was a Marine, always a Marine. I'm shut down. I'm not going to express anything because I'm tough. It's good luck, because that doesn't work in any relationship. And Jesus showed us that. And when my wife respects me the most is when I feel like I'm the weakest. It's really weird. And I feel like God and our wives view us the same way. How in the world can we be viewed as tough and manly when we're crying and we're sharing the secrets of our hearts and vulnerability to our wives, and she says, I love you more now than I ever have? And I'm like, how in the world, what? But it is a real thing. It's a real thing. So allowing life, our wives, to form us into this man that we're supposed to become is really important, and not running from it. I love this analogy. Charles Spurgeon wrote this, and I've shared on this a little bit before at church, but I just love it. I'll share it again. But it said, I would, my brothers and sisters, that we could all imitate the pearl oyster. A hurtful particle intrudes itself into its shell, and this vexes and grieves it. It cannot eject the evil, and what does it do but cover it with a precious substance extracted out of its own life, by which it turns the intruder into a pearl. Oh, that we could do with the provocations we receive from our fellow Christians, so that pearls of patience, gentleness, long-suffering, and forgiveness might be bred within us by that which was meant to harm us. And doesn't that sound amazing? It's if we had music in the background, that'd be amazing. But living that out, so next to impossible. Like for me, it is next to impossible. Giving up on people. That's like an easy thing to do, easy route, but not giving up on not only our wives, but people and our friends and the guys around us. That takes guts. That takes true manliness. Yeah. Jesus didn't give up on any of his disciples, to the point where Judas, he knew Judas was stealing money and being disloyal to the max. If there's a face with disloyalty, it's Judas. Jesus knew the whole time and didn't give up on his 12 disciples. Didn't give up on anyone. And it's incredible to see that. And that's what being a man is. That's what being tough is. And a friend of mine, one of our artists, Josh Baldwin, he was telling me this when I was just meeting with him one time about his dad. And this is the story where a guy totally blows up his life, and somehow I respect him more than people that didn't blow up their lives. It's really weird. He is a pastor in a small town, and blows up his life, has an affair. And you know how these things go. There's three sides to every story. The reason for the affair, I'm sure there's both sides. Anyways, but he got obviously the short end of the stick, because that's a big deal, right? Obviously. And he's a pastor, a spiritual leader in the town, and he does that. It's like, whoa, talk about distrust. And he became like the dartboard for the entire town. The accusations, all the lies, all the exaggerations of what actually happened. It was like an onslaught for like a decade or more. But he felt from God that even in his mistake that he wasn't supposed to leave the town. And he didn't pastor during that time, but he just kind of hung out and tried to get restored. And would go into the grocery store, and everyone knew that's the guy that said he followed God, but he had an affair and tried to hide it. That's the guy. And he felt like he wasn't supposed to stay. And eventually, through his faithfulness and his not letting go or giving up, what started to happen is the town started to get a little bit more respect and trust with him. And then eventually, 30 years later, today, he's practically the mayor of the town, and he's literally revered as the father of the town.
BraveCo, man, stop what you're doing for a second. get out your calendar and mark down these dates. June 21st through 23rd, we are having our BraveCo conference here in Redding, California next year. It's going to be phenomenal. So if you want to learn more about this, you can click the link in our bio, get signed up, make sure that you're ready to get impacted by God, to bond with other men, and have an incredible experience. Now, back to your episode.
Which is amazing to me. Yeah. How God can use like the worst failure in a small town pastor to restore him to a place that he would have never gotten to without that. I'm not saying that you should go out and have an affair, but I'm saying that what God can do when we don't give up and we go through the right channels to restore our... See, a lot of us, we want to restore our reputation, but we have to restore relationship first, and then he will restore our reputation. That little part about relationship restoring, that's the part we have to restore. And then God will do the reputation restoring. When you try to restore your reputation, which we all have, and not relationships, it never works. God does not like it when we're fake, you know. Leo, I don't know how to even say his last name, Tolstoy, I don't know, said, when you understand everything, you can forgive everything. And I think in human interactions, in relationships, it's really important that we learn the why, we learn what's the person's story, we learn like, why someone does what they do. Why did someone do what they did? Why does someone act a certain way? Why does someone have the insecurities that they have? Instead of casting blame and throwing stones, but really figuring out the why behind it. It's not as hard to love people when you hear their story and understand why they are the way they are. I think it's really important in being a man, in being a safety for others, is really to learn to understand and learn to listen. We're not all called to be pastors or pastoral, but to a certain point, I feel like we are all called to be pastoral, whatever that means. I think that stigma of that word has ruined the office of what that word actually is. And I think like in being a man, I think that we're supposed to all have some form of like pastoral part of our life where we're covering other people and we're helping them and we're encouraging them and we're listening to their story. I don't think any of us are supposed to remove ourselves from that equation. I think we're all to some degree. And I tried to for a long time and it didn't work. For decades, I tried to not do that because I'm not a pastor. So therefore, that's not it doesn't work. Like, you know what I mean? In a relationship. Mother Teresa said this, and I love this because it takes the stress off of the amount of people that I feel like I'm supposed to meet with. She said, never worry about numbers, help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest you. Good. And I think it's really awesome that Jesus had 12 guys for 3 years, like his whole life in ministry, 12 guys that he was with. And it's kind of awesome, like Jesus, the pinnacle of, 12 guys that he hung out with. And so I'm like, oh, wow, that feels easier than, even though it wasn't. I'm not going to say it was easier, but that feels easier than what I feel like I'm supposed to do. So about in early spring, I had a real change in my life. And it goes with what I'm talking about right now. A real change in my life where we were having so many issues in our world come up. And I was like, man, I got to figure out what's going on. Like what's actually happening? You ever hear someone tell you this person feels a certain way? And that happens enough times and you finally go, I'm going to actually go talk to the person and find out what's going on. So I was living in that kind of that whirlwind of like just all this emotion. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm just going to start meeting with my people that I'm responsible for. And so I just started meeting with people. I'd schedule my day 8 to 4 meeting with people. Now, if you know me, Chris laughed. If you know me, that was courageous. That's good. Just that alone, if I just did that for a month, like that's God's like, you're the man, because he knows me well. The very thing I thought was going to burn me out and wipe out all of my energy and whatever was the opposite. It actually fixed and helped me, not just the people I was meeting with. It actually helped me. Because I've always wanted the best for people, or my people, the label, everyone. I've always wanted the best for them. But there started to become a disconnect where they didn't feel that. Even though this whole time I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm like generous and I'm going to, what? So I started meeting with people and then I just like, okay, just tell me your story. Like from the day you were born till now, tell me your story. And I'm just going to listen. And it was pretty incredible. Like just to see, and there's no strings attached. So I'm not looking for, a lot of times when we're listening, we're like, I'm looking for little inroads for me to insert my wisdom or my leadership or I'm looking for a little thing I can hang on to for later to stick on the shelf. And then when they behave a certain way, I pull it off and go, remember when you told me this in confidence? I'm going to use it against you. So I literally just sat there and listened to these guys and girls just share their life story. And it is incredible. All of those things that they so-called feel about me or whatever makes sense. I'm like, oh my gosh, like your dad, when you were 4, left? And you really learn how people are the way they are when you just hear their story and get to know them. So the practicals of this is love leans in first. Initiating as a man, as a leader, leaning in first. Love begins, and I think this is huge, with just listening. I've shared all this before, but I'm just going to go on this thread for a bit here. And listen long enough till you understand why. And I think this goes for marriage too. Really goes for marriage. Like if you want a better marriage, I would just try this and it would probably change everything. Listen long enough until you understand why the other person is the way they are, why they think the way they are. And even in politics and some of the tensions, like I had a phone call with one of our guys the other day and I was really frustrated. And I know enough now with connection codes and all these different things, like you can't take your frustration and blame the other person, but I was just ticked off. And I just said, man, I'm feeling a lot of fear. I'm feeling a lot of sadness, really, honestly, because of blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of amazing how the conversation went versus what I would have normally done to be like, you are, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like what is your... So you want to hear what the other person fought through to get where they're at. Because everyone has fought through different things and everyone is at different places in life. And instead of going, you're at level 1, you're at level 8, let's figure out why you're at level 1 and go, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even be at level 1 if I was you. I'd be dead. And I think the key though is listening until we feel empathy. And I'm talking to men. This is us. This is like our job as men. And being that safety, being that strength for the other person. And I will say this, I haven't done the best job even in the last month. Like I've definitely, when I had this conversation with this person, I said, man, I'm really disappointed. And he's like, that really hurt. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I probably should have said, can we chat? And I probably should have listened to his story first. And then I wouldn't have said, I'm disappointed in you. I probably wouldn't have said that because, you know what I'm saying? So there's like, I definitely have not been the best. However, this really does work. That was one time. And I apologized. At least I didn't say I'm freaking pissed off. At least I didn't say that, okay? I'm disappointed. Jen and I have I love this little story. We have a place up on the river, the north, up by Mount Shasta. And I was checking out the neighborhood because we bought this really nice lodge. It's like, and then we Airbnb it out, And so I was up there for the first time after it was all finished. And I was just driving through the neighborhood and checking out my cool neighbors. And then the neighbors where I'm like, can we burn this place down? Because it looks like a dump. That's the real conversation with me and my wife. Not like burn it with the people in it, but like somehow figure out how to remove this place that's 2 doors down from mine that looks like trash. And it just bothers me, because I'm a little OCD and I want the yard to be perfect and it to look amazing. And so I'm driving by this one place and it is like the dive of dives of dives. It's like the guy's never been to the dump. And it bothered me. 3 times I drove by, I was getting angry. how could someone do that? How could someone live like that? Why can't they just clean up their yard? It doesn't take money, just clean up their yard. I'm doing all these things. And the fourth time I drove by, I see it from about here, the sound booth. I'm looking and I see a guy out front, and there's this little red scooter, and there's like this little toy airplane. And this guy's probably in his 60s. And I look closer, and he's like really skinny, super skinny. He looks like leather, and I look close, and like one of his arms is really deformed and really short, like really, really deformed. And then the other arm's got like two really long fingers coming off the elbow area. And he's just trying to get his stuff figured out on his scooter and the toy airplane. And I guess I am like, in my mind, I'm passing all these judgments on how could this person, well, who is this person? I want to talk. And then I see this guy and I go, oh my gosh, dude. Let alone this guy's like, I can't believe this guy's come this far. Yeah. So this empathy, this overwhelming, and God, of course, the Holy Spirit speaking, you know what I mean? In that moment, empathy comes over me, and and not to cancel out the fact that, I think the guy should clean up his yard or steward what he's been given. But I get why it looks like that. I get why he's in that position, and this thing comes over me, and I'm just like, oh, this is what an amazing moment. And I'm not saying, I'm not like this hard guy driving around, that guy. I feel like I've been pretty empathetic towards people that are in pain, but that was a really good learning lesson for me, because I get exactly why that guy's place was thrashed. Because what that guy's had to go through even to get to where he's at is literally impossible. Yeah. And I felt so sorry for the guy. So sorry for the guy. Now I'm in a position where I can be a safe place and a shelter and actually minister to the person. That's right. Like Jesus ministered to people when he met them. Like Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead because he had empathy and passion and every emotion in him, and he's freaking mad. And he's like, I'm mad at death. I'm mad at hell. I'm mad and sad that these women are crying. I'm mad at the disbelief. I'm all of it. And he goes in and he raises them from the dead because he could feel all that pain. And I think it's so important to us later after that. Like I was totally on this like this train of thought and this search. About a day later, I was in Reading and I was driving behind this guy, and he's like, it was like a bumper sticker porno. He had every weird. It was crazy. It's like, how could this guy do? Like, does he not know that people are seeing this kind of a thing? Jay and I we looked at porn, but we didn't like put it on the back of our cars and tell everyone, you know what I mean? It was more in secret, and we were like kind of ashamed of it. This guy was like, here I am. And I remember when I saw that, I was like, what is his story? Not from a place of like this guy, but what I want to know his story. What causes someone to get so deranged or whatever, to get to that point. Because when I understand his actual story, then like Jesus, I can probably minister to him on a totally different level and not fix him. Jesus didn't fix people. You don't fix people. People aren't a thing to fix. He didn't fix people. He empowered people to see and become who they're supposed to be in God. And when we go around and we're trying to fix and fact and do this, it never works. We are all free individuals to become who we're supposed to be. And I think I just was like, I literally want to know this guy's story. What's his story? You know what I mean? And I'm almost done here, but I'm going to read this. I Googled this, empathy. In order to feel empathy accurately, we need to bring into play some very real skills. In the first place, we need to closely pay attention to the other person's total communication, including what the person is saying, the emotional tone of his or her speech, facial expressions, body language, and etc. We need to set aside our personal thoughts for the moment. That's hard. So that the focus of our conversation is on really hearing the other. In other words, we need to deny ourselves. This focus is not so easy, as we are oftentimes in the habit of thinking of our own concerns, thinking of what we're going to say in response, even before the person is through speaking. or like me, not even wanting to bother because it feels too overwhelming. But the beautiful thing about empathy is we don't necessarily even have to say anything. You can love without saying a word. Love is more about being present than having all the answers. And that's hard, I think, for men, for me. So hard. Like for me to love or I need to fix, right? And that's why I'm born, I need to fix. I'm a builder. I need to do something. I need to, right? How many are with me? Like men, we're in this weirdest tension because God created us to build, to fix, to do these things. But then also we're supposed to be like Jesus, who was a builder. He's a carpenter. He was a builder. He gets it. But somehow we're supposed to do this as well. Love is more about being present than having all the answers. Don't feel the pressure to have an answer or a solution if you don't. A simple nod or gesture will work better most of the time. Ask more questions than give answers. And this is like kind of me. Me and Jen had a real, we've had 2 decades of trying to figure out things out relationally with us, Isn't that marriage? Trying to figure things out? No. However, I've learned that if I ask questions to hopefully understand, like I said the other night, we're out to eat and I could feel her we're in it pretty intense. There's 4 of us. We're trying to process through some things. And I could feel her anxiety. Do you know what I'm saying? I could feel her anxiety. There was you know what I mean? And instead of getting annoyed with it or trying to say, it's not a big deal. Here's the facts. So we're going to be fine. Instead of doing that like I normally do. So I said, hey babe, could you, I didn't say why, like what's your fear? Like start asking her questions. Like, what's your fear? Like and you could feel, okay, anxiety starts to go down and she started to express, her fear. And in 2 minutes, what could have been a week-long thing that, when you leave a situation like that and then you're on the way drive home. And there is nothing that ruins our lives. And I'll say this, and I know there's women in the room, but there's nothing that ruins a husband's life more than knowing your wife is just ticked off at you. And they are making you feel it without even saying anything. And you're just, for days, you're just like, and then you start, I'll do anything. I'll admit something I didn't even do to get out of this, you know what I mean? The power of a woman is free. It's so real. So it was incredible to hear, because you're placing power in the other person's hands when we do that. And I think as men, as safety, as shelters, as people that are supposed to be secure and feel that others, mostly our wives and others, can lean on, not just ones that pay the bills, go out, make the money and do the things and create that physical safety, but also emotional safety. I think we're called to both. And I would like to pray that God would help us with this. Because I think, in reading the Gospels, when Jesus met with people, he was looking for 2 things. He was looking for their faith, which is directly connected with humility and their vulnerability and their realness and their risk. And he was so against pride. That's why the Pharisees made him angry, because they were so filled with pride. But everyone that knew that he was a savior and that they needed something and were desperate and knew that they couldn't do it on their own, it's like Jesus was like, here I am. And they got their miracle. It was just incredible. And it's crazy, even the worst of sinners that were humble and knew they were the worst of sinners, Jesus is like, I like you, I'll pick you. And these guys over here, what about me? He's like, well, You think you got it figured out, therefore I choose this person. I'm joking, obviously, but so in the Bible, Jesus always met people that were humble and knew they didn't have all the answers. And I think being a man, especially in this culture, I think our first response to God probably should be, I don't have the answers. I actually, if I'm going to be honest with myself, there's no way, this is impossible, And then I feel like God gives a grace for us to be able to walk out how we're supposed to walk it out like Jesus did. So let me pray. So Lord, I pray for help for this whole thing, that story of Jesus with Lazarus and how he handled that whole situation, that we would be strong men, like Jesus was. And Lord, I pray right now that you don't resist the humble heart. And I pray those of us who are in here and we're saying, Lord, we need help. We can't do this on our own, but we have a desire and we see our weakness, but we want to be able to live and handle situations like Jesus did. Here we are. Help us, Lord. And I pray for if there's any blockages to where we haven't been able to connect with the Father heart of God, the true nature of God that culture hasn't tainted yet, that true who you are, God. And even for me, I pray you'd reveal Jesus to me even more, that, as the culture's trying to taint what a man is or what Jesus is or what all this means, I pray that you'd make it clear to me as to who you are. Yeah. And I pray you'd give us grace with our wives and those of us who are single, that you give us grace to be able to really learn how to communicate, be able to really learn how to be a safety for our spouses and our friends. Yeah. Amen. All right. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.